Good afternoon, pilot teachers, and good afternoon, students. Thank you, sit down. Okay, if you go back to our booklet, you're going to check now to see that we have completed so far information on page 7, 8, and 9 that is to do with cultivation of rice. We have also completed the 6 activities which are on page 10, and they are the exercises from 1 to 6. Your homework, I ask you to complete activity 7 and activity 8. And in our lesson today, we are going to look at the correction of those 2 activities. Then we are going to go back to looking at page 6 of our booklet, the information on historical Java and agriculture that we have left out. By the end of the lesson, at least we should be able to look at some of the factors which contribute to ensuring that agriculture is actually practiced or performed accordingly. And those factors are divided into physical factors and human factors, of which you are going to find the information on page 6 of your booklet. But before we go ahead to looking at agricultural information on physical and human factors plus historical Java, let's correct the 2 exercises that are there on page 10 of our booklet. We'll start off first with the activity that is shown on the photograph on page 10. Okay, if you look at the activity in our booklet, the instruction reads, what activity do you think is being carried out in the photograph? So we're looking at this photograph here on page 10, and the question, which is question 7, reads, what activity is actually being carried out in this particular photograph? Gideon, thank you. Your answer for that question.
Threshing.
Okay, if you did say threshing, you'll definitely be correct. Anyone else perhaps would think another activity beside threshing is actually taking place there? Ovio? Okay, thank you, Ovio.
Harvesting.
Harvesting? Okay, generally you are correct because the activity is to do with harvesting. We can see that from all the rice stalks that have been actually pulled out and put together. Okay, if we have to be specific, then threshing, because you can see the lady in this particular photograph is actually holding on to bundles. And those bundles are bundles of rice stalk or the rice plant itself, to allow the bundles to be beaten against a bamboo frame so that the kernels or the seeds are actually removed from the rice plant. So Gideon is correct to telling us that this is the process of threshing. Photograph may not be very clear, but it is actually showing us that particular activity during harvest period or the harvest time. Okay, good. Now we move on. Let's look at exercise 8. On the monitor, the activity reads, describe an account for the relationship between population and rice land in Java. And before we can answer that question, let's look at the map. You have 2 maps that are given. The first one shows us the distribution of population. And the second map shows us the rice growing areas on Java. Okay, look at the population distribution. And that map there gives you an idea on where most of the people on the island of Java are distributed. If you look at your booklet on page 10, the booklet with the dark color, the black color on the map of Java indicates more than 900 people per square kilometer, per square mile. The shaded areas on your map on page 10 shows us between 500 to 900 people per square mile. And the areas that are not shaded on your map shows us people areas with less than 500 people or persons per square mile. On the monitor, the same map is actually given, again showing us the population distribution and density. The dark orange color area shows us information with people over 700 per square kilometer. Okay, so this one here is for per square kilometer, the dark orange color, over 700 people per square kilometer. We have to identify some of those places. Sorry, it's not dark orange, it is a little bit more to brown, the brown color. You would note also that the brown colors, they also show us some of the main cities or urban areas also on the island of Java. Then we come to the pink color on the map. The pink color shows us people about 100 to 700 people or persons per square kilometer. These are some of the sections here, the pink color to represent that. And you note that they are closer to the areas where you have the dark brown color. The next color is the lighter or the orange color this time. And for the orange color, it is supposed to show us between 10 to 100 people or persons per square kilometer. So the orange color here, some of the areas indicated would be here, this section here, and etc. Okay, then we have the yellow color on that map. And the yellow color indicates between 1 to 10 people or persons per square kilometer. So all those areas with yellow then, they are sparsely populated, between 1 to 10 per square kilometer. And then finally, the areas that are supposed to be in the lighter color, the lighter yellow color, to represent under 1% or at least a person per square kilometer. Okay, we need to make reference to the second map in our booklet. And the second map in our booklet gives us information about the rice growing area. Okay, we double check now. The rice growing area, you can look at your map on page 10. The two main areas that are given for the rice land, first of all, Sawa is actually in the dark or the black color on the second map on page 10. And the areas that are not actually shaded in on your map represents mainly forest areas of Java. Let's look at the map here, perhaps to help us with the account that we are supposed to actually describe between population and rice growing area. The areas that are in these two colors here, the apricot color, the lighter apricot color then, and the dark one. Those are the areas where land is actually cultivated, and the darker color is mainly for cultivated land where rice is actually dominant. So you look at these regions here. This is the area where rice is mainly grown. We go back to the population map. The brown color are the areas where population density is the greatest. The dark brown or the brown color. The question, having looked at those two maps, someone now will have to describe and account for the relationship between population and rice land in Java. Do you think there is a relationship? Yes? Account for it or account for that relationship. Mason, read out what you have written for that particular question.
Where there is rice cultivation, there is a large population density there.
Okay, I think that is also correct and straightforward. Where you have population that is over 700 according to our map, or where we have an area which is densely populated, we have cultivation of rice is also greatest. In other words, a lot of people would live where rice is actually grown. And that should be the account to answer that particular question. On Java, a lot of people live where there is cultivation of rice. And that will also conclude the exercises and activities on page 10 of our booklet. Okay, do your corrections, and today we are going to move on now to looking at information going back to page 6 of our booklet, and that is the one on the physical and the human factors when considering practicing agriculture or farming. Okay, from our booklet, looking at agriculture. When we study about agriculture in a particular area, we can look at various factors that influence the type of crop or the type of animal which is actually raised. Some of these factors are physical factors, and some of those factors are human factors. When we look at physical factors, those factors are mainly what is found and what can be contributed to the type of agriculture or farming by nature. We may not have a lot of control over because they are to do with nature. Whereas, when we look at human factors, they are the factors that people have an influence over. Factors such as capital, money, building, transport, they are all part of the human factor because people definitely have an influence over. We have the factors given on page 6, and we are going to look at each one of them. And then the next task will be for us to identify whether those factors are examples of human factors or physical factors. You will also be required to make note of that information quickly into your notebooks or exercise book. Okay, the factors that we need to analyze are the first one, climate. When we look at climate, we are basically looking at whether a place is hot, cold, wet, dry, etc. That is an important determinant when we are looking at farming, because when we are growing crops or raising different types of animal, climate plays a very important influence on the type of crop or the type of animal that is being raised. If you were living in a temperate region, perhaps closer to the polar regions, plantations of coconut, coffee, or even cocoa may not be suitable in those areas because the climate may not be able to cater for or may not allow those crops to grow well. Therefore, climate is very important. Similarly, if you were in the tropical regions, some of the crops, for example, like wheat, may not grow well on the coastal areas of the tropical or equatorial regions. Why? The climate may not be suitable for that crop to grow. Therefore, when we look at one of the important factors of agriculture, climate is an input into the farming system or agricultural system. The next important factor that we need to consider will be that of relief. When we talk about relief, we are looking at whether a place is mountainous, whether a place is flat, whether it is swampy, etc. Relief, again, is very important. When we are growing crops or when we are looking at raising of animal, the type of landform is important for us to be able to obtain the maximum out of whatever farming activity we are practicing. We go to Indonesia, especially on Java, where the land is hilly or slopey, the type of farming activity or practice will be terraces being built. So there are different activities that can actually take place to cater for the type of relief in a particular area. We move on. Soil is also another important factor when we're dealing with agriculture. We want to know what type of soil for the crops to grow, whether the soil is volcanic, whether it is alluvial, whether it is laterite, whether they are pod soils, etc. And the type of soil can also determine the output of the crops that are grown. Do you think soil will have to do with raising of animals? The type of soil? Okay, in mixed farming, definitely yes. So that the crops that are grown can also be used for feeding the animals. But to say that the animals to feed on the soil, it may not be really correct. So when we're looking at the type of soil in terms of laterite, volcanic, alluvial, we're basically looking at growing of crops. And the crops will need certain types of soil for them to be able to grow well. Okay, another important factor is that of market. And when we talk about market, we are not looking at, say, for example, Gordon's market or Koki market. No. We are actually looking at the population size in that particular area whereby farming or agriculture is taking place. In other words, we are interested in looking at what we call the purchasing capacity of the people in that area. It is not going to be good if we are going to build a mall, let's take for example, in Port Moresby, maybe at Gordon's, and the population is not big enough for them to actually buy everything which is, or to be able to go and shop within that mall. We might want to build a shopping mall whereby the population is large and the population can actually make use of the whole facility. It is not good to actually produce a crop in an area whereby people will not be able to buy the crop. Then we are wasting that particular crop and we are also wasting the resources. Market is very important when we're looking at agriculture because we need to know the purchasing capacity of the people so that we can produce enough to cater for the for the demand of the population. Okay, another important factor that has to be considered when dealing with farming or agriculture is also transport. When we look at transport, we are looking at whether there is a well-developed transport system to get the produce to the selling place as soon as possible to prevent them from perishing, especially those goods that can go bad quickly. In Papua New Guinea, we also have very good agricultural produce or products. The biggest problem in Papua New Guinea is transportation of those products to the markets. Why is it that we can grow tomatoes very well in this country? We can grow capsicum, we can grow a lot of market garden foods, but yet we import a lot of tomatoes from Australia and New Zealand. We also import a lot of capsicum from overseas countries. Why? Perhaps we need to develop the transport system and transport network in our country so that we are able to bring those products and produce from the local markets to where they are to be sold and maybe consumed. At this point in time, because our transport system and network is not well developed, we are still importing a lot of goods that we can produce and grow ourselves in the country. So transport is important. Finally, technology. The level of technology and expertise available for use is also important when we are dealing with farming or agriculture. We want to use what we call appropriate technology to allow maximum benefit from the agricultural practice that we are performing or working on. We do not want to get technology that is not appropriate and then find that it is a waste of time and money and effort when we could use that money on maybe better crops, irrigation, and etc. What we have on page 6 of our booklet then and what we have just looked at on the monitor are some examples of important physical and human factors that we need to consider when we are looking at the topic on agriculture. Anyone with any queries or questions with regards to any of those factors that we have just looked at? No queries? Okay, the next task now that you're going to actually do will be, I hope you have already made note of those factors. And the next thing you're going to work on now is identify next to each of those factors by simply writing down the letter P or the letter H to indicate whether those factors are examples of physical factors or human factors. You have climate, relief, soil, market, transport, and technology. Next to each one of those, simply put down the letter P if you think that factor is physical, and put down the letter H next to each one of those if you think they are human factors. That's the next activity now that you're going to work on. I'll give you only 3 minutes to work on that, and we'll check and correct the activity. Okay, shall we correct? Okay, good. We double check. Climate. What is that an example of? Human factor or physical factor? Shelley, we go around from the front.
Physical factor.
All happy with physical? Okay, good. Catherine, relief?
Physical factor.
All happy with physical? Okay, that's correct. Soil, Val?
Physical factor.
Happy with physical? Yes, for soil it's also physical. Market, Dorothy?
Human factor.
Okay, market this time, it's to do with the people, therefore it will have to do with human factors. So H for market. Okay, looking at climate, relief, and soil, they're examples of physical factors. Now we have market, an example of human factor. Mason, the next one, which is transport.
Human factor.
Human factor. And finally, technology.
Human factor.
Okay, human factor is correct. Okay, double check. You should have climate, physical, relief, physical, soil, physical, market, human, transport, human, and technology, human. Again, transport, technology, market are to do with people, people having an influence, therefore they are part of the human factors, whereas climate, relief, and soil are to do with the nature, natural environment, therefore they come under physical. Okay, we move on. This time we're going to look at the map given on page 6 on historical Java. And if we look carefully at that map, we talked about one of the important factors when we're discussing agriculture, and that is transport. Transport is very important in order for goods and services to be brought to the people. If the transport network is not well established, then obviously there's going to be problems. Some of those problems we are also experiencing in Papua New Guinea, whereby most of the areas, especially perhaps the highlands of Papua New Guinea, whereby the climate and the soils are good, we are able to grow crops that we are exporting. Sorry, we are able to grow crops, but yet we are importing those crops from other countries. And the reason for why perhaps we are importing is because our transport network is not well established, whereby we are able to get those crops in our remote areas to where the market is. So when we look at the map on historical Java, one of the things that is actually highlighted is the transport network, which enables agriculture to be very productive in that area. But the development of roads and railways on that particular island of Java did not just come about. It did come about as a result of the colonial powers that were actually there in that particular region. Which country colonized Indonesia? Which country colonized Indonesia? Ebony? Or anyone from the class? Elsie? Which country colonized Indonesia?
Dutch.
Dutch? Is Dutch a country? Val? Val?
Spain.
Spain? We happy with Spain? No? Gideon?
Netherlands.
Netherlands, yes. The people of Netherlands are known as the Dutch, yes. So Dutch is not a country. Netherlands or Holland, that's the country. The people of Netherlands or Holland are the Dutch. Okay? The country that colonized Indonesia is Netherlands or Holland. Therefore, when they colonized that country, they were also able to develop one of the main regions, and that is Java. They concentrated, the Dutch concentrated mainly on the island of Java. It was in historical times the center, that particular island has been the center of the major trading routes. People and traders who were coming from Africa, from Europe, from India, and trying to go into China, especially for spice trading, would have come past the Indonesian archipelago. And one of the central points that they were actually stopping over would be Indonesia. And to be specific, the island Java. And because they were stopping over along that particular island, it meant that with them came in the goods that they were bringing from where they were coming from, and maybe trading also with the people in that particular region. So when the Dutch came into that country, and when Netherlands colonized the country, Indonesia, one of the areas that they concentrated most of their effort and interest on was the island of Java. One of the reasons why they were interested so much on Java was that they found that the soil in that particular, or on that particular island, was very fertile. And because the soil was fertile, it meant that they were able to grow crops. And the crops were successful. Therefore, whatever crops that they obtained from that particular island, they sent back to their own country. In order for them to be able to get the crops from one point to another point on that particular island, they needed to build very good transport network. So if you look at your map on page 6 of your booklet, you will see a map of Java, and you will also see that that map shows us the roads and railways that are on that particular island. And by looking at that particular map, you will also note that the whole island is actually connected by roads and railways. And those roads and railways were actually built for the purpose of transporting the goods from the remote areas of Java to the ports that the Dutch established when they were in that particular, or on that island. What was the significance or importance of that later on to the maybe Javanese or to the Java people, and also to Indonesia? Let's say if you were in that particular area at that time, and you were maybe the country that is colonizing, what would be the main motive for why these people or the Dutch were actually building those railways and roads on that island? I think we have found that out already, yeah. It was so that they're able to transport their goods from one point to the ports especially. But what significant or what importance did it have later on for the people of that particular island and also for the country as a whole? Is there any significance or is there any importance later on? What could it be then? Gideon, what do you think?
It made it easy for the development of the.
Okay, very good. It made it very easy then for development also to take place in that particular area. It made it easy for people to be united. It made it easy for communication to actually be established. Transport is very important. If you can go from one point to the other, then it makes it easy for you to have access to perhaps the services and also to maybe other amenities that can actually be provided. The people who were developing that particular region at that time didn't see it that way. They built the roads and railways to ensure that their products were going to the ports easily. But in the long run, the railways and the roads served an important purpose to the people of Indonesia and also on Java. So if you look at that map, you can see that the whole island is linked by roads and railways. And the linking then makes it possible for development to advance easily and quicker. Therefore, from the railways and roads that were actually built, it meant that infrastructural developments, health, education, etc., were established more quickly and rapidly on that particular island compared to the other outer islands of Indonesia. When did Indonesia gain their independence then from Netherlands? When did Indonesia gain their independence from Netherlands? Did the Dutch people stay in Indonesia and stay there forever? No, they didn't. They had to leave at one point in time and also in history. So when did they leave Indonesia? Any ideas? The country, when they left, also meant that the country gained their independence. It was in 1945 where Indonesia gained their independence. That's when also the Dutch, they left that particular country back to their own homeland. We look at the information presented on page 6, and most of that information has already been summed up on the monitor. So looking at historical Java very quickly. Java is the center of the major trading routes in history, which meant that that area became well developed compared to the other outer islands of Indonesia. We already note that Dutch concentrated their effort on Java because the soils were fertile and crops grew well in that region or area. Therefore, good transport network was established to transport the products to the ports. And finally, because of the good transport network on that particular island, it meant that the area was well developed in terms of infrastructure, health, education, and etc., compared to the other outer islands of Indonesia. Okay, you have been given a map of a map of Java. The activity now that you're going to work on that particular map. There are two activities. The first one, I'd like you on that particular map, the blank map of Java, to plot the following cities. And the cities are Jakarta, Yogyakarta, Bandung, Semarang, and Surabaya. Those are the 5 cities that I'd like you to actually plot on the blank map of Java that has been distributed. And secondly, refer to page 6 of your booklet, and I'd like you to also indicate the transport network, which is basically the roads and the railways on that same map. You will notice that those cities or main urban areas on Java, and they are well connected by the roads and railways on that particular island. So first of all, plot in those cities on Java, and secondly, use the map on page 6 to show also the railways and the road system on that particular island. Okay, with those activities, that will also bring us to the end of our lesson. Okay, class, if you can stand up now, please. Okay, to the pilot teachers, our keyword for lesson 146 is historical Java. Good afternoon and thank you, students.